The world's definitely looking a little brighter. And as I said, we're glad you're all here. It doesn't look like it's going to be too long till we can see most of you in person again. And we were talking right before the meeting that this is the 1-year anniversary of our first Zoom meeting, and who had any idea that it would be going on this long? But thank goodness for this technology and for flexibility with nonprofits and our constituents, because so many have gone nonprofits and have been able to serve without too much of a hitch there. Currently, TVNPA has virtual events planned through July. We were just talking to that maybe we'll have some member events in person once, like July, June, July, August, depending on where things stand. Hopefully our programs will be back at the Bankhead in the fall, and hopefully will be hybrid, so that people who aren't necessarily right in the area can still attend, or if their schedule is not so flexible, then maybe they can attend over Zoom too. So that's one of the goals I'm trying to work for. In the meantime, we have wonderful programs lined up for you. As you know, today we have our very own Chris Carter from LVPAC and Freddie Silveria, and they're going to share their knowledge and experience in creating successful events in these times of uncertainty. In May, we have Dr. Suzanne Wortham. She founded Worthwhile Research and Consulting, and as a venue to apply linguistic anthropology to real world problems. Who knew there was such a thing that existed? But she is an anti-bias researcher and consultant, and she's an expert in the ways that bias is expressed through language. So it's definitely touches in the DEI, which we want to continue that conversation, but it'll also help you get an idea, like if you had a meeting that didn't go well, you know, what you might have done in your choice of words to contribute to that. So she's located in the Bay Area, but she works internationally, and we're really, really lucky to have her. I'm going to drop a link in the chat box on what linguistic anthropology is in a minute, so you can check that out in case you're curious. And then mark your calendars for June 10th for our annual Grantmakers panel. And as a reminder, this is a slightly longer program, and we will start at 10 a.m. Then in June, we are lucky to have Dr. Lydia Evans-Hughes, Dr. Renee Rubin-Ross. Renee runs the nonprofit certificate program at Cal State East Bay, and Jim Taylor from Board Source, and they'll be talking about board recruitment and retention with an emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion. We'll then be scheduling a special follow-up working program with Dr. Lydia Evans-Hughes on how to actually implement these ideas. So it's not just a theory. How are you going to actually do this? So as you see, we have a lot going on, and we hope you will join us to continue to build capacity and learn with us. And as you know, the majority of our meetings are free and open to anyone interested in the nonprofit community. But we also have a membership program. This helps us with the sustainability of TVNPA, so we can continue to serve you and strengthen our wonderful nonprofit community. With membership comes benefits. And today we're going to introduce Jen Fredericks from the Center for Excellence in Nonprofits. Jen is going to take a minute to tell you about an upcoming program of theirs and how a TVNPA member benefit can save you some money if you'd like to participate. Okay, Jen, you want to unmute yourself and tell them about it?
Yes, hello everyone. As Kathy said, I'm Jen Polidoro Fredericks with the Center for Excellence in Nonprofits. I see a lot of familiar faces and organizations, but for those of you that don't know about CEN, we are dedicated to serving and supporting nonprofit leaders, all staff, executives, and board members, and other volunteers through a variety of learning, networking, and resource development opportunities. A lot of similar stuff to what you experience with TVNPA, which is one of the reasons we love partnering with this organization. Additionally, our organization is deeply dedicated to inclusion, diversity, equity, access, and liberation, which we call IDEAL principles, our organizations, and all our services are delivered with this lens. And so today I wanted to tell you about both what Kathy just referenced, which is our boot camp, and then also our pilot IDEAL program coming up. So first is the boot camp, which is coming up next month. It'll be May 4th through 6th. And it's a great opportunity. It's a 3-day experience for nonprofit leaders to explore all the core components of nonprofit management and to better understand the nonprofit business model in general. It's great for emerging leaders that are looking to grow their impact in their nonprofit career, for new nonprofit executives or those that have been in the sector a while and really just want a refresher, or for board members that want to learn how to maximize impact through this course, we cover everything from nonprofit financials to management and leadership, strategic planning, and all kind of the different components needed to really be effective in the nonprofit sector. And through our ongoing partnership with TVNPA, we also are able to offer all TVNPA members a 15% discount on the program. So it brings the tuition cost down from $700 to $595, making it more accessible and affordable for the community. And I believe Kathy will be sending out an email later so that you have a link to the program and that discount code to register and get that discount. And then the other thing we wanted to mention is our upcoming Ideal program, which we're piloting for the first time this month. It'll be toward the end of the month. It's a 2-day program, and it's designed to be a genuine, candid space to explore the principles of Ideal, so inclusion, diversity, equity, access, and liberation, and the effect these principles have on the community you serve and your organization as a whole. The sessions are intended to provide a respectful, non-judgmental space and an opportunity for growth and thought partnership. Because we do go deeply and authentically discuss the Ideal topics in the course, we also ask for vulnerability and courage of participants. And so we wanted to share that opportunity as well here with the TVNPA community to encourage you to learn more and hopefully join us for this pilot program coming up. So thank you, Kathy, so much for the opportunity to be here to share a little bit about the upcoming boot camp, and we hope to see a lot of you there. Sorry, my cat, of course, wanted to join this meeting. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Jen. And it wouldn't be a meeting without a cattail, so thank you. Check that off the list. I'm dropping that link into chat right now if you're curious about linguistic anthropology. I am going to quickly let you know that we are recording this session, and if you don't want to be seen on Zoom, this is a good time to hide your video. And so I want to give you that heads up. And now I'm going to turn the meeting over to Carolyn, who's going to introduce our program for us today.
All right, thank you very much, Kathy. I'm Carolyn Siegfried. I'm the proud board chair for Tri-Valley Nonprofit Alliance and also the executive director of the Pedrosi Foundation in Livermore. And I'm very excited to be able to introduce our speakers today. Chris Carter is a very experienced fundraiser. He's the current executive director of the Livermore Valley Performing Arts Center. And before being appointed as executive director, Chris served as director of development and communications for LVPAC. In his role, Chris was responsible for all of the fundraising and marketing efforts for LVPAC. Since he joined, he raised more than $8 million for the arts in Livermore. He joined the LVPAC staff in 2014 after working more than 11 years at St. Mary's College in California, where he spent the last 8 as a leader in the college's development department. His last position held there was as director of alumni engagement and annual giving. Chris has led and participated in multiple professional workshops on fundraising, strategic planning, event strategies, and volunteer board engagement and management. So we'll be able to learn a lot from Chris. And joining Chris today is Freddie Silveria, and as the owner of FSA Auctions. Freddie BAS has fundraised millions of dollars for local nonprofits, charities, and schools. FSA Auctions has intensive experience in raising funds for causes, conducting 50 virtual and hybrid fundraising events. In 2020, Freddie was a presenting speaker twice on virtual hybrid fundraising events for the National Auctioneers Association. This year in 2021, FSA Auctions was featured in the National Auctioneers magazine for their expertise on virtual hybrid events. Freddie is one of 30 auctioneers in California to have earned a benefit auction specialist designation, hence the BAS designation from Las Vegas. He is a graduate from the Worldwide College of Auctioneering in Iowa and St. Mary's College of Moraga. Freddie is an AFP board member and a Rotarian. So welcome to both Freddie and Chris.
Well, thank you, Carolyn, and thank you everyone for joining Chris and I. Chris and I go way back, as you heard, to our St. Mary's days together, and just an amazing, amazing person. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to make as much use of our time today as possible and hopefully give you as much value and insights that can help you as you plan for fundraising events for the rest of the year and moving forward. So if you wouldn't mind, without further ado, if you could just comment in our chat bar, let us know your organization and either a question that you have for today or a expectation or desire that you hope to get from today. So what do you hope to get from today as an expectation, or what is a question that you might have coming into today's webinar on fundraising events for 2021? So we see some comments coming in the chat, and Chris and I will leave time open for you for more Q&A at the very end. But Chris, if you wanted to say a few words before we get started and kind of what you're excited for and looking forward to with today.
Yeah, thank you, Freddie. And as Freddie said, we do go way back. I knew Freddie when he was a student at St. Mary's College, and I was working there as the alumni director. He told me he wanted to be a professional speaker, I believe, motivational speaker, and so that's what he's doing for a living. So he's gone down the right path, and I knew he went into doing auctions for fundraising benefits a few years ago, and I'll have been itching to work with him at some point, and we had that opportunity this year, and so I was glad to do that when we had our online benefit that we did in November, which we called the Best of the Bankhead.
Yeah, and we had such an amazing event, which we'll talk more about, and Chris will share a couple examples from successes we had and what we've learned. What I was planning to do with you is I'll review some of your questions in the chat bar. But I was going to share with you 3 quick videos that are each about a minute long, and they'll give you an understanding of how 2020 has gone and what we see for the future. Some of us were just talking before all of you joined us on about the new April 15th date, which is new and exciting for a lot of us, that things will be opening up. Nobody really knows what that means, but we'll kind of see how that goes. Just to give you a quick background, I have now conducted 52 virtual and or hybrid fundraising events, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have along those lines, as well as the future of where we're headed. So just to give you a couple nuggets as we get started. First, I would say that none of us know what to expect for the rest of this year and how that's going to look, but I can kind of share with you some trends and knowledge of the industry, of what other nonprofits in the Bay Area are expecting and what we see for the rest of this year and moving forward. So without further ado, if you wouldn't mind, just keep those questions coming. We'll check in on those. Lori, I see you. Kristen, Charles, Aaron, Liz, Nadia, Betty, Asia, Carolyn, TJ, so many folks coming in. So feel free to join us there in the chat bar. And I'm going to share with you a few quick videos here, each about a minute long, to paint a picture of what virtual events have looked like and what they might potentially look like for the future. So here's a couple quick clips. Feel free to keep the questions coming in, and Chris and I will be back shortly here with you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to ESF Virtual Auction. Let's make history. We've got so many folks coming in the chat bar.
Oh, Tish. Hi, Tish.
Tish, yes. Yes, we've got so many. Debbie, Lori, Jenna, Bree, Luciano. Yes, our newest board member.
That's right. Luciano was just voted on last week.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to hear what he has to say.
Please enjoy Tom Janis.
All right, so that is the first clip, which shows you just a little bit about engagement with the chat bar, which is something that was very, very important that we learned in this past year as a best practice for virtual events. You'll also started to see a couple key things there on the bottom about making sure folks are ready and prepared with donations, a lot of email marketing that goes into creating that success, QR codes. So that kind of paints you a quick picture of what they might look like. Also in the chat bar, if you wouldn't mind just letting us know your experience with virtual or hybrid events. Has your nonprofit or organization done one? How did it go? We'd love to hear from you and be able to share that knowledge with everybody else on our Zoom today. Without further ado, here is another 60 seconds from a different event that will show you a live fund in need portion.
Dollar tonight is going to mean more probably than ever. Imagine the last year that we've been through with COVID, and we can only imagine that tuition assistance is going to genuinely be needed more now than ever to help our families out. Alyssa and Brian McCrell at $1,000, folks. We're on our way to $20,000. You're making a huge difference tonight. Tom's coming in 100 again. Nina's coming in 100 again. Folks, we're almost to 23,000. Together, you're making a huge difference together for our Mustangs. Yes. Marlena coming in at 500. Folks, 7 more. We surpassed 25,000 together right here, right now. Here we go. Mindy coming in at 250. Look at that, folks. Alejandra Ramirez just took us over 26,000.
So that paints you a little bit of a picture of a live fund in need. If you haven't seen one, which I'm starting to see some comments in the chat bar, a lot of action going on. Here is 30 more seconds from a different perspective. And here it is. This comes right after our fund in need video or special appeal or power raise. A lot of people call it different things.
COVID, I can't even imagine what it's like for children behind closed doors living their secret.
I have done this gala, obviously in a ballroom before, but this feels more exciting because we're all in this together. We can chat with each other on the YouTube. We can see what everybody's giving, and it is just that wonderful feeling tonight that we're doing this.
Yes. Valerie came in. Valerie came in. Yes, Valerie. Yes. Valerie, I've got you at 1,500. Marjorie, I'm back to you. Marjorie came in. Yes. Marjorie. Yes. 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 Valerie, I'm back to you, Valerie.
So that painted you a little picture of the live auction component of a virtual fundraiser. I'm seeing Chris's face over here. He's got the smiles going left and right. And then we'll finish it off with one final 30 seconds of behind the scenes, how a virtual and hybrid event comes together. I'll also show you some photos from hybrid events, what some watch parties could potentially look like. That's another thing that we've learned in this past year as well. So this will be the last 30 seconds and we'll get straight into it. And here it goes. All right, so we're back. Good to see everybody. Seeing the questions come in. We've got tons of questions and comments coming in here, and we'll make sure to touch base with as many of those folks as we can. A couple quick questions that I do see here is what programs runs the fund in need, and did a virtual event. We've got more virtual events coming up. What are the ballpark costs associated with an online auction? Just briefly reading off some of the questions I see in the chat bar. Would you suggest increasing participation and attendance at virtual events? What's the best day and time? A lot of great questions that I will try to fly through in the next 90 seconds. So hang tight, folks. Grab your pen, grab your paper. Here we go. All right. So platforms to use. A lot of us have probably used different platforms for virtual or hybrid events. I know with Chris Carter, with our event, We even used another platform as well that they specially had. So there's a lot of different types out there. It really depends on the features and benefits that you want. Obviously, budget is part of that as well. The top three that I would suggest, I've used probably a dozen different mobile bidding softwares. I really like Greater Giving, One Cause. One Cause also goes by the name of BidPal. Also GiveSmart, as well as HandBid, Octria. There's quite a few out there, but I would suggest that those are probably the top five. Prices can fluctuate from very low cost in the hundreds of dollars to as much as 15, 2,000 plus, just depending on the features and benefits that you want. Do you want text messaging included? Do you just want to do a fund to need? Do you want to have mobile bidding? There's a lot of different reasons for why you would have things, and happy to expand more on that later if that's of interest. What is the best day and time for a virtual event? There's a lot of different days and times that work. I would first suggest reaching out to your board and making sure that their board or staff seeing what might make sense for them. I can share with you basics. Generally, just as before COVID, our in-person events usually many times were Thursday, Friday, Saturday evenings. That's still pretty true for a lot of virtual hybrid events, that Thursday, Friday, Saturday evenings are typically best. But I've done breakfast, virtual breakfasts at 8 a.m. So it really depends on your donor base. And the best thing that I suggest nonprofits do if you're trying to figure out day and time is I always like to encourage you to reach out to your top 5 or 10 donors and just do a quick survey. They're pretty understanding. You probably had some connection going on with them in the last couple of months or something, and just say, hey, we're all going through COVID. We're planning a virtual or we're planning a fundraising event, and you're a major supporter of ours, and so we wanted to just reach out to you and kind of see what your thoughts were on the best day and time that you would like to attend an event. So I like to start there, reach out, not to everybody, but just your handful of donors that are pretty strong and connected to you on what might make sense. I know Chris, remind me again, we did, was it Saturday night? I think we did.
We did a Saturday night.
Yeah. So Saturday nights are have always been a tried and true time. It works pretty well. But like I said, I've done every day of the week with a virtual or hybrid event. And there's different reasons for why you would do different times, but typically Thursday, Friday, Saturday, starting at 6 or 7, somewhere in that ballpark is usually about right. In terms of the cost, there's a lot that goes into a virtual event. It really depends on what you want to do, but I can share with you the components that you'll probably need on a budget side of things. You're going to definitely need some type of AV tech team. With Chris, Chris was fortunate and blessed that he has a phenomenal AV team at the Bankhead. And Chris, if you wanted to expand on that more, feel free. But that's one of the key components is the tech side of it, making sure that runs seamlessly and flawlessly. Most of our donors have probably already experienced at least one, if not more than one, virtual hybrid events already. And they're expecting it to run flawlessly or at least close to that. I think the most donors have experienced some type of event, virtual or hybrid, that's fundraising, and we've been at this about a year, and so we're looking to. In the beginning of virtual events, there was the latency factor. The very first virtual fundraising event I did was in April of 2020, which was about 4 weeks after COVID hit. And we had 30 to 45 second latency factors, which is delays on the live stream. And within, 2 months, we were getting that down to almost instant. So there's a lot of new tech out there that can make things look very, very awesome. So AV technology, that can always fluctuate based off of pricing. It all depends on who you're partnering with. What are the features and benefits that you want to use in production that you would like? The other component is somebody that knows what they're doing with a virtual hybrid event. That would be somebody like myself or somebody that understands the skill set is very different with a virtual hybrid event as opposed to in person. And many times there's folks that are really good at in-person events that skill set doesn't translate to a hybrid or virtual event. It's very different when you're talking to a camera versus a room full of hundreds of people. And you have to be able to create energy and keep it engaging. And part of that is the planning process that goes into it ahead of time to create that really tight run of show, where I would suggest that no videos are much longer than about 3.5 minutes. Now, I've been a part of events that have 5-minute videos. I've even been a part of ones that have 7 to 8-minute videos. That's up to you on what you decide, but 3.5 minutes is about the limit of the length of videos. And there's a lot of work that goes into creating a really tight run of show to make it a successful event. How long should, I'm really flying through questions here, so hope you got your pens going. This is some information we've learned recently in the past year, but events should be pretty tight. I've done a hybrid event in 15 minutes, and then I've done it in about an hour. The ideal sweet spot is somewhere between 35 and 45 minutes. Anything past an hour, you're starting to potentially lose folks, and it's probably too long. So, and I say that humbly and gratefully. Those of you that have had longer events than an hour, I'm sure you've had phenomenal content in there. It's just kind of a rule of thumb. An hour is about the max. And I know with Chris, our event, we were getting it real tight there to about an hour. So
we were, but we had so what we did for our video content was we reached out to performers that had performed at the Bankhead in the past that were very popular. And I asked them to send me a personalized video for our audience and to do a 3 to 5 minute performance, which we got about 6 videos. And one of them actually was 20 minutes long, which we put at the end. But they were, it was different because they were musical performances and they were people that we knew, and it felt very personal. And we didn't really experience any drop off throughout the whole event that I can recall. But it was a little bit different because we were able to find these musicians and performers to, like Paula Poundstone and Keiko Matsui and people like that to do these videos for us. So it's a little bit of a different format.
Yeah, and that comes back to creating that run of show, creating it engaging so that folks don't drop off. And that's something that Chris and I worked on very, very tediously prior, is we look at every single second to make sure that it is engaging and captivating for our guest. That 20-minute video was our send-off piece that we had at the end. If folks wanted to watch the whole thing, they could, but we had already gotten through most of the event. I'm still seeing a lot of questions come in the chat, and I love it. And we'll make sure to touch base on as many of them as we can. Ticket prices or cost for tickets, that is up to you on what you'd like to do. That is a whole hour conversation. But Chris, if you want to give a couple examples.
Yeah, I can tell you what we did. So we had, first of all, we had sponsors, which sponsor levels. So that was one thing we did. But generally it was free to watch, but we asked for a donation. So when you filled out the form, there was an opportunity to donate, and nearly 100% of the people that signed up made a donation. And then we did a meal as well that was delivered to your home, and that was a ticketed price. And so I believe it was $150, and you got food for 2 people. And we would deliver it to your house. One of the things we did with the sponsors was I would be the one to do the delivery myself. I dressed up in a tuxedo and I drove out to your house and do the delivery. But we really we tried to make it accessible for everybody, and to ask for a donation instead of putting a ticket price. I would say we actually raised more money through that than having a ticket price just to watch it. And then also the people that bought tickets also made donations too. So they would buy their ticket for the $150 for the meal and then make a donation on top of that. And so one thing I learned This is just true for any fundraising event or in general for fundraising, is never underestimate the generosity of your donors. So if you don't ask for it and you don't put it out there, they may not give. But if you give them that opportunity to give and you set the bar at a certain level, most of the time they're going to meet that level. So don't be afraid to ask and to set that bar. So that's how we did it for ticketing.
Yeah, and Chris, I don't know if you saw in the chat, but Tracy, she just shed best advice ever, Chris. So
Good to
Chris,
hear.
yeah, I'm going to revisit that with you in a second, Chris, as we come back to sponsorships and one of the biggest things that you learned from our event. But I want to just segue and put a bow on the ticket prices as we transition back into sponsorships, because I think there's a good segue there. Tickets could be a lot of different ways to do it. You heard how Chris did it, and there's a bunch of comments coming in the chat bar as well. I've done events that have been free, and I've done events that they charge $500 for a ticket price. So there is a wide range of what that could potentially look like. What I would encourage is, if you do go to the free route, is to do something similar to what Chris did, and that is to have a donation optional component for when people are registering. That makes a lot of sense to me, and that's what I would suggest and encourage for you. If it is going to be free, at least have a donation component attached to when they register. And then if you do charge, there's different things that could go into it for charging for an event. There's different reasons for why you might do that. One of it is what Chris also shared, is a guest could receive some type of meal, or they could do a drive-through pickup, or they could do a lot of different things along that. And I'm sure a lot of you have experienced that or done that in some other capacity with another virtual event, or heard something along those lines. One of the things that I would just throw in as a caveat to think about as we start to look at the end of this, is going into the end of this year and then into the next, is the watch party component. You saw a couple photos in the videos I showed at the beginning. That could potentially give you an opportunity to have a larger ticket price by creating these watch parties. And I'll just spend 30 seconds on this, on watch parties, and I'm happy to elaborate more in the future if you'd like. But watch parties could look different for a lot of folks. They could be 6 people in your home. They could be 20. They could be 30. It all depends on what people's comfort level is and all of that. And that's totally up to you as the nonprofit to decide what you want to do. It's really, your call on what makes sense for you and what you feel comfortable with CDC guidelines and whatnot. I can share with you examples from other nonprofits. I will share with you a quick photo, actually a few quick photos of what some watch parties actually looked like. I hired a professional photographer to go in and take a couple photos. Here's an example of some watch parties in people's house. This was 3 couples that got together that had been checked ahead of time. This was individual packaged meals that were brought to a house party. So that's another thing to think about if you're doing catering and you're charging a ticket, that those might be individually packaged. Mask, creating it fun environment. This was a breast cancer event. They had a lot of fun, going over the top programs in people's homes, cupcakes. This is a great picture. It shows you kind of what it looked like as a watch party. They had the TV screen up with the YouTube there. The ladies had their mask, and then they're bidding from their mobile device as they're watching one television. Different spreads. This is a different nonprofit. Here's an example of some ladies mask in a room. This is a great example of what a watch party could potentially look like as we get a little bit more eased into COVID, as we're getting through this. That's example. And they also hired a live musician for their backyard party as well. So don't want to spend a whole lot of time on watch parties, but you got some good photos there to take some examples. As we transition into sponsorships, as Chris just mentioned, and Chris, I'll have you share what the biggest thing that you learned from our event about sponsorships, which was absolutely huge and totally helped me as I started to help nonprofits after our event. But What I would encourage is to write these 3 things down. And that is where to spend your highest return on investment for your time and energy when planning a virtual, hybrid, and in-person event. And these are probably things that you did prior to COVID for in-person events, but they became even more and more true with virtual and hybrid. Number 1 is your donor engagement development strategies. That is something that I've coached nonprofits before COVID and even more so with COVID. That one of the most important things that you can be doing throughout the year is consistently engaging with donors and sharing your story and the stories of your beneficiaries, missions, and causes. That can look different for a lot of different folks. Obviously, some of you might have a monthly newsletter. Maybe it's a social media campaign. Maybe it's a combination. Maybe there's a lot of different things that could go into that. One thing that I would suggest, I always like to just give you one little nugget that might help you, that I think is something that maybe some folks don't do that others could do and benefit from. And that is, in some shape or form, whether it's social media, email, newsletters, print, whatever that might be, I would encourage at least a 30-second video at least once a month or at least quarterly to your donor base. That's just kind of a hello, hi, I'm Randy, I'm Kathy, I'm Kendra, I'm Terry, I'm XYZ from XYZ nonprofit. Just wanted to say hello and let you know of a current update and how we've been good stewards of your funds. A lot of times you'll write that in an email or you'll do a newsletter that gets sent out, but that little 30-second or 1 minute or 90-second video, and I even coach nonprofits where they've done it by just pulling up their smartphone and for 90 seconds doing a selfie video and then sharing that on email, social media, whatnot. It's a great way to authenticate yourself and connect with the donors, especially during COVID. Everybody's getting emails and digital stuff all day long, but if they can get that little video and it's easy for them to see, that can be very helpful. So number 1 is donor engagement marketing strategies. Number 2, for virtual, hybrid, or in-person events, sponsorships is one of the main focuses where you're going to make the majority of your funds. The third component is the fund and need, special appeal, or paddle raise. So what I try to coach nonprofits on is if you can focus as much time, energy, investment, and resources into those 3 areas, you can create a very, very successful event, whether it's virtual, hybrid, or in person. The challenge that I had working with so many nonprofits this past year is that some of them did not focus their time and energy on those 3 areas. Some of them focused more of their energy on the production of how the event might look in terms of the videos and the run of show. That is very, very important stuff. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the top 3, because if people don't show up to our event, it doesn't matter how good the event looks. So they need to show up first. So marketing, sponsorships, fund and need, focusing as much time, energy, and resources on those 3 areas. And Chris, I'm going to stop talking in just a second, but just to reiterate this point on sponsorships, there's a lot of things that can go into it, which is what Chris, I'll have you share about in just a second. With fund and need, paddle raise, special appeal, some quick nuggets that I would encourage you focus on for that to help your event be very successful is the marketing and the donor strategies you're doing prior all year long. Donors should be knowing, what's going on and how you're being good stewards and all the updates that are going on throughout the year, so that when the fund and need or paddle raise or special appeal happens at the event, they've felt connected to throughout the entire year, where it's just an easy, yep, I know what they're doing and I care and I want to support. The other key things, a lot of us have been doing this now, but it's even more important with a virtual hybrid event, is to have pre-confirmed leadership momentum gifts for our fund and need or special appeal. Carol, I see the smile there and you were kind of nodding your head. I see it. Yep. So essentially that is a pre-confirmed gift for our fund and need. That is somebody that's going to say they're going to raise the paddle at the highest level of our fund and need. So 60 seconds on this. And then Chris, I'm going to have you take it over with sponsorships because I've been talking for too long, but we're trying to jam this in about 30, 40 minutes. So for the fund and need, for special appeal, paddle raise, whatever you might want to call that, what I would encourage is that you try to get at least one pre-confirmed gift at the top 3 levels. So if your top level is 25,000 and then you're going to go to 15,000, then 10,000 or whatever, if you're going to start at 5,000, 2,500, 1,000, at least try to have one pre-confirmed gift at the top 3 levels. And here is the magic words that I did not coin. They actually came from Kathy Kingston, who is a late fundraising auctioneer that passed away about a year or two ago. She wrote a phenomenal book. I'm seeing some head nods here, but she calls this leadership momentum gifts that generate energy and inspire giving. Those are literally quoted from her. I'll say it one more time because I say this every single day to nonprofits. Leadership momentum gifts that generate energy and inspire giving. So when you're talking and reaching out to the donor base and you're saying, hey, John Doe or Jane Doe, you've been a major supporter of ours for many years. We're so grateful. What we've learned about how to create success with a virtual, hybrid, or in-person event is to have a few leadership momentum gifts for our fund in need that generate energy and inspire giving to hopefully inspire others to want to give and support our cause. What might be a meaningful level of gift for you towards our fund in need? Something along those lines, up to you on how you would want to say that, but that's about all I'll share there. That's really important stuff that I share with nonprofits many times. Chris, that was really a lot of information. I need to take a breather and take a sip of water. But Chris, if you wanted to speak any more to what we just shared there and or specifically your example with the sponsorships.
Sure. And one thing I want to point out is I think people notice Freddie has very high energy in those videos. And this is like my top level. If you know me, this is about as energetic as I get. And so when we did our event together, we kept joking that we were like balancing each other out. But I think it worked really well. A couple of things I just want to say. First off, if you've ever been to one of our fundraising events that we've done in the past, our traditional gala is a season opener, and we try and get a performer to an artist to perform with the symphony, and it's a big wingding, a big deal. So in 2019 we raised about $500,000. It was a lot of work, and we want to go back there. But one thing I can tell you with the virtual benefit, it was much more cost effective in some ways. And so we raised 500,000, but our costs were pretty high. For the virtual one, we raised over $200,000 and our costs were very low. Just to give you an idea, we spent about $20,000 on our event, and most of that was the food, the catering. So over half of that was catering. So it really can be a cost-effective way to raise money, even when things are open. So it's something to think about in the future. And then in regards to sponsorships, one of the things I learned is because we were, in our traditional event, our highest level of sponsorship was $50,000. And because we were going virtual, and this is, I didn't follow my own advice of underestimating the generosity of donors. And I thought, well, this is a virtual event. They're not getting as much. So we're going to lower the top sponsorship level to $10,000. And everybody I asked to go to that level did it immediately. And it was so fast. I was hitting myself because I thought, oh man, I should have asked for more. So that was the one thing I really learned was just because it's virtual doesn't mean you can't raise a similar amount of money. And so that's a really important lesson. And for me, going back to that, never underestimating the generosity of your donor pool. And I kind of explained the format of what we did, but the other couple of things that we did that Freddie talked about too, is we did heavily market it, mostly digital. So we kept our costs low there, but we also were able to get some media sponsors through KKIQ. So on the radio, we had some radio ads. We had local newspaper ads, and most of those were donated or very low cost. And so we spent a lot of energy on marketing the event. And then in regards to the fund in need, we did do a match I believe. So we had a donor that said, I'll match the first 25,000 that you raise in the fund a need. And just like Freddie said, I had already raised that money before the event even started. So I had called a lot of our donors ahead of time and said, can I count on you? I see you're coming. What can I count on you for? And so we got all that information and we were ready to announce it right away. They didn't have to raise their paddle, but we had their names already in there and we were listing them as they were going. And something that you saw, which I thought was kind of unique to the virtual events that was really helpful, was that the feed where you could see the chat and you were able to name people individually and thank them individually, which you could never do in a gala setting, was a great benefit to being able to have it online. So I think that's was a good lesson too, and a nice benefit to the chat. And some people asked about AV. So we're fortunate we have a space where we could film in the theater. So we didn't have to go to a studio. We used a company called Advanced Creative, but I know Jody Amos is also very good at this. And there's some other local companies, and Freddie might be able to suggest a few as well. But that was just somebody we've been working with, and they came in and it was just 2 cameras. It was really simple, and it worked out really nicely for us. And we did a rehearsal on the morning. We kind of ran through it, earlier. And then the other thing I liked about the virtual event is that in some ways it did feel more intimate. We weren't all together, but we were able to spend more time telling our story and talking about the importance of what we do. And I thought that felt great. It wasn't just, someone coming onto the stage and kind of, bantering. It was definitely more intimate because it was Freddie and I talking to each other and talking to the camera directly to the people watching. So I thought that was a great benefit. And I do think in the future, definitely this summer, hybrid events. So some people had asked about that. I would definitely work on a hybrid event if you can. Although it might be more work. So maybe stick with the virtual through the summer until you're able to fully open or have a full capacity event. And that's something that we've talked about at the theater. We weren't really planning on opening for performances until we could operate pretty fully, because there's a cost to operating that doesn't go away. So a couple other pieces of advice. Freddie, I don't know if you mentioned like how many people should you have? A good goal is 200 devices, 150 to 200 devices. So we were right around 200, and we hung in there most of the event. We didn't really drop off. And so that means you're looking at maybe 300 to 400 people actually watching the event. And at that point, you have a really critical mass. And people would donate we use BidPal, so people could donate on BidPal. They could also donate through the chat. So if they just wrote on the chat, I'm doing $500, we could follow up with them and say it with a call and take their credit card later. So giving people multiple opportunities to give and making it as easy as possible has always been, a good rule of thumb. We did do a live auction, and we did a silent auction, which we opened up a week ahead of time. And we even did a raffle, a jewelry raffle. That's tricky because you can't sell raffle tickets online. It's illegal, so don't do that. But you could take phone calls or have people mail in their certificates to you to purchase raffle tickets. But we made money on the raffle. Someone asked about bandwidth issues. We had to test that out, and we had to make sure that our bandwidth was strong. We did a hardwire. We didn't rely on Wi-Fi. So those are good things to think about. I'm trying to think anything else. I think it's just, the caterer we used was Beats Hospitality, just so you know, and they did a wonderful job. We delivered all the food. We had an army of volunteers that delivered everything. And we used our own software for the live stream that goes through our ticketing system, but it's basically a Zoom-based software. But I think Freddie said the YouTube Live and Facebook Live are really popular. So anyone where there's a chat feature, a live chat, I think is really what you're looking for. And that's the most important element. And you never, like I said before, you never miss an opportunity to donate. I saw on like one of the videos, there was a QR code that was just there. So I'm sure you just put your camera up and you can make your gift through that, or you have a link on the page that's always available. And we've done several virtual events where it's just, even after that, and before that, the gala, we've done a lot of virtual concerts where we make it as easy as possible to make a donation online. And every gift counts. So trying to think, anything else, Freddie?
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's why you're awesome, Chris. I mean, you're knocking it out of the park here in terms of really good insights. I appreciate it. And I would encourage anyone that's on the Zoom today, feel free to reach out to Chris. Great insights that you're sharing. What I'm going to do is just kind of button this up and wrap up a few things and talk about the future of where we're headed and what I see other nonprofits doing for the rest of this year and beyond. And then Chris and I will open this up for a live question and answer here in about 5-6 minutes. So here's a couple things that we learned to piggyback off of what Chris was talking about. We learned about hybrid events. I've done 5 hybrid events, and I'm doing 10 hybrid events over the summer. And then I'm doing another 30 events or 40 events or something like that in the fall. So what I can share with you about the fall is that a lot of folks are going to be doing events in the fall in the Bay Area. It's going to be a very, very busy time for in-person events. And what in-person is going to look like is potentially a little bit different than what it used to look like. But there are some people that are planning in-person events for the fall in the Bay Area. There are some people planning hybrid events in the summer. A rule of thumb is to plan a virtual event and an in-person event. If you're going to do a hybrid event, it's basically planning an in-person event and doing a few things that have to do with virtual. And I'd be happy to expand more on that if there's questions. I've done the hybrid events and they've gone very, very well. It's part of it is having the mobile bidding open prior, and folks are giving towards the fund a need while they're watching a live stream of me doing the fund a need paddle raise. I'm taking all the bids in the room, but I also have a screen in front of me where I'm seeing gifts come in for the fund a need in real time. People are watching a live stream. There's a lot of components that go into it, but honestly, a hybrid event is pretty easy. I say that kind of with tongue in cheek, whereas the challenge is for many nonprofits, it's always your first time with something. When you've probably been doing an in-person event for the last 10, 20 years, and you're like, okay, we can do an in-person event. And then now all of a sudden you have to do a virtual or hybrid event for the first time. There's always a little bit of a learning curve, but I can, myself or Chris or other folks can help guide you through that. So some of the things we learned is that if it's virtual or hybrid, as Chris stated, we want to give every opportunity possible for a donor to give their funds, whether that's in the chat bar, whether that's on the mobile bidding site, whether that's on your personal nonprofit website, whether that's a mailing address for people to send a check because they couldn't figure out the technology during the event, or it's a phone call. It's a phone number that they can call during the event. And we have tech support set up prior so people can call the number and say, hey, I'm struggling with this tech, but I want to give you $1 million. So here's my credit card information. I'm kidding. But usually it's more like 5,000 or something like that. But so those are some things that we learned. Also, opening up the mobile bidding prior to the event is highly important, as Chris stated. Most nonprofits like to do it about 5-7 days prior, and usually close the fund a need, paddle raise, special appeal a day or two after. And that's all different for every nonprofit, depending on what you want to do. Some nonprofits have opened it up a month prior. Some of them have kept it open for a week or two after. And so it really just depends. But best practice is usually opening up mobile bidding about 5 days prior and closing it about 2 days after for the funded need. There's a few things there. This is the 3 key areas that I touched on about strategy that are really important. Again, sponsorships, marketing, funded need. Some things that surprised us in this past year with the events that we did is how important chat function is. It is so vitally important. I have seen a lot of other virtual events from other nonprofits that I haven't partnered with. I've seen what they've done. The chat is so key because it keeps that intimate and engaging factor. And I coach nonprofits prior in rehearsal about how they get in the chat bar as much as they can, and then that'll hopefully empower other people to join us there. And so there's a lot of work that goes into creating a successful chat bar. It's not just, oh, we're going to put the chat bar and people are going to chat. There's a lot of work that goes into that. And there's a lot more I can speak to that if that comes up in Q&A. We were surprised how much people gave. In terms of the facts and the numbers, we did of the 50 virtual hybrid events I did, about 24 of them, just shy of half, had the highest netting events they've ever had. Part of that is because it doesn't cost as much for a virtual event, as Chris stated. A rule of thumb is it costs about $10,000 to put it together with tech, with myself, and mobile bidding. That's about kind of a rule of thumb. That can fluctuate depending on how extreme you want to go. Some people's production is 1 camera, some people it's 10 cameras. And in the behind the scenes video I showed you in the beginning, it could be as simple as the 1 camera setup, or I did some very elaborate ones for $1 million event where they spent a lot of money on production. So it really depends on what you want to do. Some other things that we learned is how to make it fun and engaging. We create a text campaign so people can text photos of them watching the event to a phone number, and then we put that up on the live stream of the event so people can see themselves on the live stream, their watch parties, which is really cool. I've worked with a lot of different production teams and I've kind of coached them on how to do it. They've also figured out how to do it. And so most people know what they're doing with that. These are some frequently asked questions I briefly went over in the beginning, the right day and time. If I was to give you the exact day and time for the ideal situation, it would be first to ask your donor base. Second, think to talk to your board. Third is, again, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights are typically best, but that can all depend on your donor base. The best platforms to use. Everybody has their own opinions on how to do it. I really do like YouTube Live as the best way to do it. If it's a free event, if it's not a free event and it's ticketed, I would not encourage YouTube Live, because YouTube Live can be out there for anybody. And if it is ticketed, you'll want to make it an exclusive event. There's a lot of different platforms out there that can do it. I personally like Zoom Webinar, not this Zoom that we're in now where people can see everybody, but Zoom Webinar is where you can't see faces and it's only names. The reason why is because of the latency factor is very low on that platform. But I've used Vimeo, I've used YouTube, Facebook, Wemex. There's a lot of different platforms out there, and folks are doing really well with making that happen. Live auction items. I'm going to just quickly run over this real fast. Something that you might not think of as a live auction item that's selling really well is home improvement projects. I sold brand new hardwood floors for your house for $15,000 at a virtual event. So you were going to get all brand new hardwood floors. The reason why was donors were already going to be paying for that stuff, because that's what they're doing right now, is making home improvements on their house. And they figure, well, I might as well just get it from a donated fundraising event. So that's just kind of a little nugget. Obviously the experiences and the travel packages. If you are going to have a travel package, driving distance has been tried and true this past year with COVID. As Mexico and other things start to open up, that might change, but still, the ideal package for most Bay Area nonprofits is a week at the most amazing cabin in Tahoe. Always is going to sell really well. It's always going to get thousands of dollars, and it's an easy package. that sometimes a board member or volunteer might be connected to. There's a lot more that can go into that. You know, there's a Hawaii and all of those stuff, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time. If that comes up in questions, great. Run of show is really important. And last but not least, I've created a Google Drive with dozens of nonprofits examples in there. And I share that with a bunch of my nonprofits I partner with. I've also learned the power of a co-host. I've done many events on my own, but and they can be done, but it's really good to have a co-host there. Chris and I did it together and it went really well, making it fun, interactive, making it very clear for the registration cycle for the donor so it's not confusing for them to give their money. All important things that we've learned. So that's my contact information. I'll feel free to put that into the Zoom as well, but I wanted to just stop there and give us enough time for Q&A. And Chris, whew, let's take a breather. How are we doing, Chris?
We're good. One thing I failed to mention as a lesson learned is and I think you touched on this, is we probably could have used 1 or 2 more staff there, especially to moderate the chat, because we had one person moderating the chat and also processing the donations at the same time, and it was a bit overwhelming. So I would definitely err on the side of having a few more staff on hand. So just another lesson learned.
Definitely. So feel free to type your questions in the chat bar. Chris,
yeah, and then we'll also have an opportunity to do live questions, Freddie. So if somebody would like to ask your question live, let's try first and go ahead and use the raise your hand function on the participant bar. I'm going to look there first, and then I'll also look to see if somebody's actually raising your hand. Let me get in gallery view. So is there anybody who has a live question that you'd like to unmute yourself and ask Freddie and Chris while you have their undivided attention right now, what expertise they're sharing with us all. All right, I'm not seeing one. I'm going to start by asking a question so what do you think the future is of silent auctions? In-person silent auctions, or will it always be kind of an online platform, or is the better return fund a need?
Well, yeah, there's a lot to that question, Carolyn, but I think you were spot on there at the very end. The best return is going to be for the fund a need, for sure. I think a lot of folks spend too much time and energy on silent auction, and it's a lot of stress and it's a lot of work to get all those items and do all of that when it doesn't yield enough funds. The fund a need is going to make triple, quadruple, sometimes 10x a silent auction. And so that's something to think about. I always try to encourage nonprofits to spend more time and energy on creating a successful fund a need than the silent auction. The silent auction should have maybe 10% of your time and energy, where the fund a need should have 60 to 70%, because that's where we're going to make the money. Because the fund a need doesn't just happen. You don't just get up there and ask for money and then it comes in. A lot of work goes into that prior. But specifically on the silent auction part of that question, I do think the mobile component will stay for the future. I think mobile silent auctions for sure. Prior to the event, a lot of donors and guests have said how excited it has been to be bidding on items prior to the event. And then when the event happens, they've been connected to the cause for so long. And I think donors have also started to understand tech in their mobile device and how that works. And I don't think the virtual or hybrid is going to ever fully go away. I think there's always going to be some type of online component, because it's done wonders. The reach has been phenomenal. We were getting $5,000 and $10,000 checks from grandparents for school events that didn't live in the Bay Area that wanted to support their child's school. And, that had never happened before at in-person events. Grandma was never going to fly from New York to go to her kid's school event fundraiser, but online she's going to give. So, Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think silent auctions, if you have some volunteers that are really excited about them and doing most of the heavy lifting, then it's not a problem, which we've been very fortunate. We have some volunteers that love putting together silent auctions, and it's not a lot of work for us. And we we do okay. We do better on the fund and need for sure. So you have to kind of determine, are you leaving money on the table by not doing one versus doing one? But I think Freddie's right. With the fund and need, it really is important to talk to your donors that are coming ahead of time and making sure they know what's coming and that they're in the room and they're ready to raise their hand, especially the lead donors. And you have to be able to also, with the fund and need, to tell your story appropriately and to make sure it's very clear what the money is going towards. And I know, Freddie, you and I, before our event, we even had that conversation one last time. Really, what is this supporting? And we made sure that we were talking about that throughout the event. And also the nice thing with the fund and need too is, even though the fund and need was like a certain section of the program, it was still open throughout the evening. So between videos, Freddie could come on and say, oh, we've got, Carolyn just did another donation, and Kathy did a donation, and Charlene did a donation, so you can keep it going too throughout the event, which is really helpful. And you remind people that it's, even if after the kind of the scheduled portion of the fund and need is done, they can still do it if they want to. And so I would just highly encourage that.
Yeah, and fund and need, just in short for those, is just an opportunity where you ask for funds and people donate just to support the cause. They're not getting anything in return for it with their live auction. And to piggyback, as questions start to come in, well, this is, I think, a really important question that I've articulated a couple different times, but just to make it a little bit more clear, for the rest of this year, what will fundraising events look like? Most nonprofits in the Bay Area, most nonprofits aren't doing any type of in-person components till about September. And September and October, I'm starting to see in-person events. What those are going to look like is different for every nonprofit. Every nonprofit is totally different. Some nonprofits are going to have 25 people in a room, and then the rest is going to be online. Some nonprofits are planning 250 people in a room and some people online. So it really depends. I wish I had a good answer for you, but nobody knows. I don't know. I don't know. I only know as much as I can see from other nonprofits, and every nonprofit's taking a different perspective on it. So wish I had a better answer for you.
Too, last year, this event, and then the live one before that, we raised double what we anticipated on the fund and need both times. And there was something about the momentum of one or two big gifts that really made a huge impact. And our live one that we did in 2019, I had a donor that was prepared to do a $25,000 fund and need gift. And right before we walked into the theater for the event, he told me to start it at 50. And so for some reason, he was really excited, and then one of his guests matched him. And so it was just this incredible moment. And I just think the fund and need is really the most critical part if you do it right, and you tell the story the right way, and it's emotional, and if you're authentic about what it's for, people will rise to that occasion. And for our online fund and need, I think we almost got to 100,000. We were like over 90, if I recall. And I did not expect it to be even close to that. So really, I highly agree with Freddie. Do your legwork ahead of time. Get some of those big gifts scheduled and planned out. And then you'd be surprised what other people start doing when they see that.
Kathy, this is a very common question that you have in the chat bar. Should the fund and need be the last thing you do? There's a lot of different schools of thought on how to do that, but with a virtual component, the cool part is you can do both, which is something that I've actually, haven't seen a lot of folks do, and it's awesome. And how that would look is putting the fund and need, special appeal, paddle raise, whatever you want to call it, putting that first, then doing the live auction. And then what I like to coach nonprofits is we'll revisit the fund and need after the live auction. Now that's something that you typically couldn't do at an in-person event prior, because typically you would do your live auction, and if guests didn't get their the second or third place bidders didn't get their live auction package, you'd put the fund need at the end, and then that's where you would think that they would give their gift. I'll be honest with you, this is before COVID, I've always encouraged nonprofits to put the fund in need before the live auction. I think it sets a different tone, and if it's done right and done well, it can be much, much highly successful, but it takes some work. And for most nonprofits, they've been used to doing it the same way for 20 years, the live auction, then the fund in need. And 4 years ago, I was coaching nonprofits in the Bay Area to put the fund in need first. And it's been highly successful. And with a virtual event, you can do both. You can put the fund in need first, the live auction, and then at the very end of the live auction, you could say, wow, that was such a fun night. Let's just revisit our fund in need real quick and see where it's at. Oh, wow, during our live auction, our fund in need, we had another $2,000 that came in for gifts. And what do you know? We're 2,000 away from 50,000. Let's go another 60 seconds and see if we can get to 50,000. Yes, we got 100 here, 100 there, 100 here. And Chris Carter's coming in with a $5,000 check. Thank you, Chris Carter. So, anywho.
I want to add another good tip that Freddie gave us for the live auction was a lot of times people put their biggest item last and flip it. Put your big item first, because oftentimes the people that are waiting to bid on that are not bidding on anything else because they're waiting for that. And then once that item is done, then they still have money to bid on other things. And so it was an interesting, I'd never thought about that, but I think that was a really good idea. And then somebody asked about the fund in need being restricted versus unrestricted. It's really up to you. It helps to tell what it's for. So if that means it's restricted. So in the past, we've done it for our education fund. This year, it was unrestricted, but the way we framed it is we were really doing it for our staff who were furloughed at the time, because we were covering their healthcare benefits. We were doing everything we could to keep them on board as much as we were able to during the closure. And so that really, and it was absolutely true. That's what that money was going to go towards. And people responded really well to that. So be honest and give them an idea of what the money does go towards. But it doesn't need to be restricted if you're telling a good story about the organization and what you do.
And I know we're on the time here. I'm always try to be respectful of our time. So I know this is kind of where we're at. I know Carolyn or Jen, somebody that wants to take us away. But the last things I would say is just thank you for the opportunity. Chris, it's always a pleasure, and go Gales. And feel free to, and Broncos and all the other people and Lions, but go Gales. But thank you everybody for your time today. Feel free to reach out with any more questions. I'd be more than happy to do a phone call or Zoom with any of you at any time. Feel free to reach out. You can find all my contact info at fsaauctions.com. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Freddie and Chris, for all of that great information. But Freddie, somebody wants to know where you learned auctioneering. That might give you a little competition, but you seem pretty busy these days. And I think that's going to continue to be so.
Yeah.
So are you going to share with that?
Oh, yeah.
Where did you learn?
So I actually went to Auctioneer College. It's back in Iowa. There's about 3 or 4 colleges out there. And then I just got my MBA in fundraising auctioneering, which is that BAS. And I'm currently working on a PhD for auctioneering. There are all these weird things, but there's actually a thing out there for auctioneers. So just continuing the education and trying to support nonprofits the best I can. I feel like I have the best job in the world. It's pretty cool.
So I think that Freddie is a great example of he's taken his role and as an auctioneer and to be a professional, and he continues to do ongoing education to increase his knowledge base, his professionalism, and his experience. And that's a big part of what we do here at TVNPA, being able to look at all of the names on this list, see all the organizations that everybody is involved with. We are all wanting to be professionals and learn best practices and learn from each other. So that's one thing I'm very proud of, being part of this nonprofit community and strengthening it for all of us together. Chris, any closing comments from you?
No, just I always tell people to be a good fundraiser, you have to be authentic, be a good person, and don't be afraid to ask, because there is some math to fundraising, and the simple formula is that the more people you ask for support and the more often you ask, the more you'll be able to raise. And be shameless for your organization because you believe in it, and you do good work. So they deserve it. They deserve to get that philanthropy and to get those dollars and to make sure that you can continue to do your good work.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, for those comments. And I'll invite Kathy Young, the president and CEO of Tri-Valley Nonprofit, to say some comments as well.
Thank you, Carolyn. And I definitely want to thank both Chris and Freddie very much for a wonderful presentation. I just love how the nonprofit community is willing to share their experience and their knowledge with each other to help strengthen everybody. And so again, we hope you will join us in the upcoming months. I think we have a few minutes afterward if you want to stay on and ask a couple of questions. We'll be on for another 5 or 10 minutes. So feel free to stick around if you're interested. And thank you, everyone. Have a great day and stay safe and healthy.
All right, and I'm going to take Chris Carter's lead as the board chair for Tri-Valley Nonprofit Alliance. As Kathy mentioned, all of our meetings are free to attend, but you saw in your registration that there was an opportunity to donate to TVNPA as an organization. And you heard about a membership benefit through our partnership with the Center of Excellence for Nonprofits. So I encourage you to become a member of TVNPA. That's a very important revenue source for TVNPA, as well as your contributions and donations. So you can go to tvnpa.org and donate online, or click that button every time when you register for a meeting as well. So thank you again very much, Chris and Freddie. Thank you all for joining us today. And thank you for all of the work that you do to make our community stronger through your either as your job as at a nonprofit or your volunteer service as board members and volunteers for organizations. Thank you very much, everybody.